Peptides are one of the 3 most important and kind of mandatory active ingredients in your anti-aging skincare routine. But not all peptides are the same. They're sourced in a different way, there's a different formulation, so how do you know if you're picking the right one? So today we'll be talking about peptides, what they do, how they formulate it, how to pick the right one, and why you should actually use one. Hi, I'm Desi Stark and welcome to my channel where we talk about luxury skincare, beauty, and lifestyle products. So the biggest question is, why do you need peptides and why did I just call it one of the 3 most important active ingredients in your skincare? Peptides actually help with a lot of different things, but the biggest functionality of peptides is actually they boost collagen and elastin production. And I think I've mentioned quite a few times before, but around the age of 25, you start losing collagen. The body doesn't produce as much and you start losing some of it. You start losing actually about 1% per year. Peptides also help create elastin fibers in your skin, so your skin becomes firmer. They can also help with inflammation in the skin, with acne, with dryness. Peptides also help with wound healing. They can also help protect your skin from harsh environment like pollutants and even UV rays. So what exactly are peptides? Peptides are short amino acid chains that are bound together. And you can actually put up to 50 different amino acid chains so you can form a peptide. And that's how they're different than proteins, because they're smaller chains. Usually in skincare, the peptides that are formulated are anywhere between 2 and 10 short amino acid chains that are put together. So when you think about it, if you, let's say you take 10 short amino acid chains, depending on their order and how many actually short amino acid chains you put together, the formulations, the variation in formulations of a peptide could be infinite. There could be an infinite possibilities of how you formulate a peptide. And that's the struggle, because every skincare company out there could potentially create their own peptide, but they really don't know if that peptide is actually functional, if it's successful, if it's effective to a skincare routine. And you truly don't know until you either do a clinical study or you put it in the market, and a couple of years later, based on feedback, you realize, oh, I have a successful formulation of a peptide. And that's usually why certain companies, when they come up with a certain formula of a peptide, they put a patent on it because they want to protect it. It's been proven, it works, the feedback is enormous, yes, it's great for anti-aging, it works. Some peptides that actually have patents on them are Cynic or Geraldine. There's a bunch of other ones. I do talk about Cynic all the time. It's one of my probably favorite peptides, or Geraldine as well, but those two actually have been patented, and some brands, some expensive luxury brands, are using them in their formulas. It's also important to point out that the more short amino acid chains you put together in a formula, the more expensive that peptide becomes. For example, if you only use 2 short amino acid chains to form a peptide, that's going to be less expensive than a peptide that contains 8, 9, or 10. And that's all great. We'll learn some science on how the peptides are formulated. Now, the most important thing is actually to answer the question, how exactly do peptides do that? Why are they so effective to an anti-aging skincare routine? Why do they promote collagen build and elastin build? Why does the body react in such a way that when you introduce a topical peptide to your skin, all of a sudden your skin decides, oh, okay, now I'm going to start making more collagen just because of this peptide? See, when a peptide is introduced topically to the skin, your skin is tricked into believing that it's injured. So the primary function of your skin is actually to heal itself and protect the rest of the organs underneath. So when you introduce a peptide into your skin, the skin freaks out, start thinking, oh my God, I'm injured, heal me. And it gives a signal to the body to start producing more collagen and elastin a little bit faster so it heals itself. Now, in addition to the fact that there could be an infinite different formulations of peptides out there, I do want to point out that there's also 4 different classes of peptides. And it really depends on how the peptide exactly behaves and how it promotes collagen build, and by the methodology and the method that it does it. The first group or class or type of peptides is the neurotransmitter peptide. So the neurotransmitter peptide is pretty much your superhero. That's probably my favorite class or favorite type of peptide because they pretty much behave like Botox. The way that they work is they relax or kind of freeze actually your facial muscles. So when your facial muscles are relaxed or sluggish, they actually tend to move a little bit less, and then all of your wrinkles or fine lines are smoothed out. And in fact, there was a study in 2009, a clinical study that actually proved that if you use consistently a neurotransmitter peptide, you could potentially reduce your wrinkles and fine lines by 35%, which is kind of actually a large number. And I'll give you some examples of a neurotransmitter peptide. Botox is actually one of them. Argireline is another one. Cynic is another one. Cynic is a peptide that I very, very often talk about. It is actually one of the main ingredients in one of my nowadays my favorite serum, actually the Line Serum by Alter. And that's why I have been using that serum non-stop for the last, I would say, 12 to 16 months because it's such an effective serum. Now, Cynic is not the only ingredient in the Line Serum, but it's one of the main ingredients, and I absolutely love it. Now, as you know, Cynic and Argireline and obviously Botox, they're all patented and they are rather expensive actually to be used. That's why so very few companies use Cynic and even Argireline in a large quantity, in a large concentration, because every time a company decides to use Cynic in their formula, they have to pay royalties to the patented company, the company that patented that successful peptide. There are other ones that are actually very similar on the market. The brand 8 Day produces a very similar, also successful peptide that the formulation of that peptide is very, very similar to Cynic. My next episode would be actually on the 10 best serums that contain successful peptides, so stay tuned for that. But for now, let's continue with the other three classes of peptides. The second class of peptides is the signal peptide. And the signal peptide is actually the one that it's most common in the beauty industry and the skincare industry. And the signal peptide actually does stimulate collagen and elastin production, and in a sense, it makes actually your skin fuller over time. Signal peptides also promote the production of laminin, hyaluronic acid, and EGF, which is your epidermal growth factor. And this is why a signal peptide is kind of more responsible for a fuller face over time. And that's not a bad thing because usually a fuller face means a firmer face. The third class of peptides is the carrier peptide. The carrier peptide is also quite common actually in the skincare industry, but the carrier peptide usually helps facilitate the transportation of certain trace elements that are responsible for wound healing and kind of healing of the skin. So it does play an important role in skin repair. The most common carrier peptide is copper. I'm sure you've come up to some peptide serums that smell like copper because they contain copper, which is the carrier peptide. Now, I'm personally not a big fan of the copper peptide. I can really tolerate the scent that much, but if it's one of many different peptides, then I'm okay with it. But I know that NIOD, for example, makes a copper peptide serum, and on me, for some reason, it really doesn't do anything. I went through a whole bottle, actually maybe 2 bottles of that copper peptide, and the scent is coppery. I mean, it smells like copper and I can't really tolerate it, but in addition to that, it just didn't do anything. But there's been studies actually on the copper peptide for a very, very long time. This is probably the peptide that's been studied the longest. I believe there's a doctor back in 1973 that discovered the copper peptide, and he came up actually with his own patent on formulation of a peptide, and he did prove through clinical studies that the copper peptide does in fact work on specifically wound healing and skin repair. So it is good to have it in your formula. And the last class of peptides is the enzyme inhibitor peptide. Now the name actually speaks for itself, but what this peptide does, it inhibits an enzyme, and that enzyme actually tells your body, stop losing collagen. So in a way, this peptide specifically, I would call it for the younger people. If you're around 25, this is the peptide that you should be probably gravitating towards, because the other three classes of peptides actually promote collagen production and elastin production and wound healing. In a way, the body actually starts producing more collagen. The enzyme inhibitor peptide doesn't do that. It just tells the body, stop losing it, stop here. I think I'm at an age that the enzyme inhibitor peptide is probably a little useless for me. I'd rather have the other three. But if I have this one as a fourth in my formula, I wouldn't say no to it either. So how to recognize if you have the right formulation of a peptide? Well, you really can't unless you have heard of a certain peptide like Cynic or Argireline. You really don't know what kind of a peptide you have in your formula. So the best approach for me is to look at the ingredients list and look at the formulation. Make sure that there is at least one of each class representing the formula. That is your best case scenario. You want to have more than one peptide in your formula, because if it's more than one, then you gotta have a different approach, or you give your formula a chance to work on different things of your body, because as we just learned, the 4 different classes of peptides do affect the body and inhibit the body in a different way. So when do you need to use peptides? I usually suggest that you use peptides as part of your evening routine predominantly, but you could potentially be using them in the morning as well. Now, the reason why I'm bringing up especially at night as part of your evening routine is because a lot of people actually use acids in the morning. Now, for example, I use lotion P50 1970 in the morning, which is by Biologique Recharge, and it contains a lot of different acids. It contains AHAs, BHAs, PHAs. And the one thing about peptides do mix well with any other ingredient, but they don't play very well with glycolic acid and salicylic acid. And the reason being is when you combine the two of them, the salicylic acid and the glycolic acid may potentially diminish the effectiveness of the peptides. The peptides become a little more susceptible to hydrolysis in this case. It will still be effective. It may diminish its effectiveness, but I personally load up on my peptide serums, a variety of them, usually at night, because I never use acids at night, any kind of acids. And once again, other than that, you can mix peptides with any other ingredient. Peptides usually work very well with retinoic acid, with retinol, with vitamin C, with pretty much any other ingredient that you can think of. Very, very, very rarely someone will have a sensitivity to a peptide. Usually these are tested in a lab. I haven't heard of any. I personally do not have any sensitivity to, well, pretty much no ingredients whatsoever. I have a small sensitivity to algae, but that's about it. But if you want my experience with peptides specifically, I started really researching peptides and trying to learn about the serums that are available on the market and which peptides are successful, which are patented. I kind of started digging. That was a while ago, probably about, I would say, 4 or 5 years ago. And I do have to mention that in the last 3 years specifically, I have been really kind of amping up my regimen when it comes to peptides, and I definitely can see the difference. I haven't done anything else but increase the number of peptides that I'm using, and this is why I talk so highly about Auteur, because, and also MBR, by the way, because these are the 2 German companies that include a variety of different peptides, and they're in-house made, and they're all successful, and they also, both companies also use a lot of Cynic. And as I mentioned before, Cynic has become one of my favorite ingredients. Once again, it's a neurotransmitter peptide, so it does act like Botox. It does save me a lot of money on my Botox procedures, because I live in Southern California. Botox procedure is usually around $1,000. And prior to me amping up increasing my regimen when it comes to peptides, prior to that I used to do Botox every 3 months, and now I usually go every 6-7 months. So this is saving me pretty much $2,000-3,000 every year on my Botox treatments, just because I have increased my neurotransmitter peptides. Now I do use a variety of peptides. Once again, I will be making a special video. It will be posted next time that will give you the 10 best peptides, best and complete peptides when it comes to peptide serums that are available in the market. And I actually do have a few budget options. Yes, believe it or not, I have been experimenting with some budget skincare as well. Now it's not going to be the cheapest, like kind of the ordinary. I don't go down there. A $12 serum is unrealistic for me. It's mostly crap. The ingredients are crap. Apologies to the ordinary. I really hope that I help you in your skincare journey, but peptides are definitely a non-negotiable for me. As of this point in my life, I have discovered probably the best formula and how to combine ingredients, and peptides is definitely part of specifically my evening skincare routine. One other thing I want to mention, from feedback from some of you, I know a lot of you have a sensitivity to retinoic acid and retinols and retinoids overall. Peptides actually can be a good alternative if you cannot find a good retinol. Now, I have found a few products that contain bioretinol. I'll be also mentioning them in my next video, but peptides are a really, really good alternative, especially peptides that contain neurotransmitter peptides. And stay tuned for the next episode. Maybe you can pick a few peptides or one peptide that you can use just in case you have a sensitivity to retinoic acid and retinol, which is, by the way, one of the second most important active ingredient. And the third one is obviously growth factors. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a thumbs up if you did, and I will see you soon. Thank you so much. Bye.